Chapter 2263. Jian Fengqi's peach blossom-shaped eyes sparkled. With a wave of his slender fingers, a piece of paper appeared at his fingertips. Why are you in such a hurry? I've always kept my promises. I won't go back on my words. Mu Hongyu took the piece of paper and looked at it carefully. Suddenly, she froze. There's something wrong with this contract. Why isn't there my handprint on it? At first glance, there was nothing wrong with the contract, but the most important thing was that her handprint was missing. Jian Fengqi waved his fan. Oh, this one. I copied it when I was bored. Of course, it doesn't have your handprint. Mu Hongyu. What did you say? She gritted her teeth and stared at Jian Fengqi with her almond-shaped eyes. Jian Fengqi took a step back. Ahem. I only said that I was giving you the contract, but I didn't say which one. Mu Hongyu raised her voice. Of course I want the real one. Why did he give her a fake one? Jian Fengqi looked innocent. But you didn't say so just now. Everyone, they had seen shameless people before, but it was rare to see someone this shameless. Chu Luiyue was full of admiration and emotion. After so many years, Jian Fengqi, you're still the best. He was the only one who could do something like this. Oh no, there was someone here who could compete with him. Tang Ke. Without saying anything, she put the tombstones together. Now, the entire Peach Blossom Dock, no, the entire world of divine ruins, knew that they had been buried together for 10,000 years. Su Li tried to explain and clarify several times, but it was useless. In the end, she could only let it go. What were all of them thinking? Mu Hongyu suddenly had an ominous feeling. How many copies of this do you have? Jian Fengqi smiled, his eyes flirtatious. I haven't counted. Every time I think of this, I will copy 1, 2, 3 for copies. If you really want it, I can write it for you now. Jian Feng. It's too late. Mu Hongyu clenched her fists, ready to fight. Sigh. Jian Fengqi closed his fan. Hongyu, it's not appropriate to fight here, right? This was the Palace of Illusions. Especially when they were still at the entrance of the Divine Gate. Chu Luiyue coughed. Hongyu, don't worry, we're here. There will be opportunities in the future, Jian Fengqi. Mu's anger. Little Yu, didn't you say that the person in charge of guarding the Gate of Heaven was the 7th Divine Envoy? Who was that? Su asked curiously. Fengqi's. Of it. This is the second time I've seen it. Su Li nodded, deep in thought. Chu Luiyue had already told them about the Palace of Illusions. At this moment, a figure walked over from not far away. He was very fast, and in a few seconds he was in front of them. It was Chang Wanzhou. Master, Lord Sun Yi asked me to come and fetch you and His Highness. Chu Luiyue nodded. You came at the right time. I'll take Mr. Su to the Palace of Illusions. I'll leave the rest to you. Chang Wanzhou bowed respectfully. Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiu. I'll be back soon. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly. There was nothing to worry about. After Chu Luiyue said a few words, he invited Su Li to go to the Palace of Illusions with him. The two figures gradually disappeared into the distance. Rong Xiu watched for a while, then retracted his gaze and looked at Chang Wanzhou, raising his eyebrows. Long time no see. You've become a god? Chang Wanzhou responded. Rong Xiu smiled. It was faster than he had expected. Let's go. Chang Wanzhou took a step back, then turned around and led the way. This way, Your Highness. On the other side, Chu Luiyue led Su Li directly to the Palace of Illusions. They had walked past the star path. As Su Li walked, she looked around curiously. There were rows upon rows of houses here, but not many people came out. It seemed a little lonely. In the end, her gaze landed on the path that was flickering with spots of light. This is the star path? Chu Luiyue nodded. It's the same as the silver bridge from before. There are profound formations sealed below. The part we walked past just now was a profound formation of a profound king master. This part is a great profound king master. Su Li suddenly understood. Then these shouldn't be a problem for little Yu. She was very clear about how strong Chu Luiyue was. These are fine. The troublesome ones are the great grandmaster profound formations in front. Chu Luiwei smiled. Su Li was startled and looked forward in disbelief. A long and resplendent path extended upwards, all the way to the palace that stood in the distance. So, many? Although she wasn't a profound master, she still had some understanding. A great grandmaster profound formation was several times more difficult than a great profound king master. Moreover, even if a person reached the great grandmaster level, it only meant that they could use a profound formation of this level. It didn't mean that they could completely comprehend a profound formation of the same level. At a rough glance, there were at least 100 of them, right? So in the past 10,000 years, those who could comprehend all the profound formations here and enter the illusory god palace were few and far between. The seventh divine envoy that I mentioned to you before was one of them. But don't worry. You're a weapon refining saint and have the qualifications to directly enter the illusory god palace. Chu Luiwei smiled. Su Li was speechless. She reached out and patted her chest lightly. Fortunately, I'm a weapon refining master. Otherwise, these profound formations would really be difficult. Chu Luiwei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Su Li was probably the only person in the entire world who could say such words. Ordinary weapon refining masters wouldn't have an easier time entering the illusory god palace than profound masters. How could a weapon refining saint break through so easily? Previously, Kong Qinglin was also said to have been stuck as a weapon refining venerable for thousands of years before finally breaking through the shackles and successfully entering that realm. It was just that Su Li's talent in this area was too strong. Moreover, her luck back then was also good. That was why she could so easily become a weapon refining saint. And how many people in the world had such luck? Ordinary people couldn't be envious. The further they went, the quieter their surroundings became. It was a silence that was extremely rare even for cultivators. The surrounding atmosphere also unknowingly became solemn and heavy. Although the two of them only walked by the side of the Star Road, they could still clearly feel the increasingly heavy pressure. Finally, the two of them arrived at the door. Chu Luiwei was about to knock on the door when he suddenly saw the door open and a person walk out. Chapter 2264. The person who came was Xu Jing. She originally planned to go to Herb Mountain, but she didn't expect to bump into Chu Luiwei as soon as she stepped out. Seeing that familiar face, Xu Jing was startled at first, then immediately frowned. Sheng Guanyu, why are you here? Because of the fear in her heart, her tone and attitude towards Chu Luiwei were much better than before. However, probably because there were no outsiders around, the impatience and irritation in her eyes were still faintly visible. Chu Luiwei didn't mind and smiled faintly. Greetings, 8th Oracle. I'm here to send Mr. Su to the palace of the illusory god. Mr. Su? Xu Jing's gaze turned slightly and only then did she see Su Li standing beside Chu Luiwei. Exalted goddess? Her frown deepened. Sheng Guanyu, don't tell me you don't know the requirements to enter the palace of the illusory god? She actually pulled such an ordinary-looking exalted goddess over and said that she wanted to enter the palace of the illusory god? Su Li raised her thin eyebrows slightly. Was she looking down on her? Although she had always had a good temper, she wasn't someone who would be looked down upon and bullied. Moreover, this person in front of her had specifically bullied little Yu before. The threshold of the palace of the illusory god is really high. So even a weapon refining saint isn't qualified to enter? Su Li smiled faintly and asked. Xu Jing was startled and a trace of disbelief flashed across her eyes. You're a weapon refining saint? Why don't I look like one? Su Li's lips curved slightly. Xu Jing was momentarily speechless and didn't speak for a long time. Chu Luiwei said, the seventh divine emissary also knows that I invited Mr. Su here. If you don't believe me, you can ask her. Xu Jing's face was a little ugly. She had just parted with Jin Yunlai not long ago, so how could she ask about this now? No need. She turned around and closed the door. Then she looked at the two with a cold expression. If you're really a weapon refining saint, you can naturally enter the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiwei smiled. Does the eighth messenger mean that we have to open the door ourselves? Those who have the qualifications and strength to enter the palace of the illusory god will naturally have no problem opening the door. As Shu Jing spoke, she didn't want to talk to them anymore. She turned around and left. Su Li turned around to look at her. This eighth divine emissary is really arrogant. Chu Liwei was already used to it. All the oracles here are like that, but she is considered outstanding. Mr. Su, can you open this door? Su Li retracted her gaze and looked at the closed door in front of her. It shouldn't be a problem. It's just... She suddenly paused, a trace of hesitation flashing across her face. Little Yu, this place... She had long heard from Chu Liwei that this illusory god palace was exactly the same as the pavilion in the sky that appeared in the Red Moon Desert. Therefore, before coming, she had already mentally prepared herself. However, when she arrived here and saw the palace that truly existed, she still felt very strange. She thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Little Yu, have you tried going in? Chu Liwei shook her head. It's also my first time here. Su Li looked at her, a trace of light flickering in her eyes. Since you were able to directly enter at that time, perhaps it's the same here? Chu Liuyue's heart moved. Actually, she had thought of this before. After all, from the beginning, everything in the illusory god palace seemed to be against her. However, she didn't have any plans to try it for the time being. There were so many people in the illusory god palace. She didn't know how many pairs of eyes were staring at this place. If she really went in directly, it would cause a lot of trouble. That wasn't what she wanted to see right now. Therefore, for the sake of caution, she still chose to pass by. Su Li saw the change in her expression and instantly understood something. I'll go in and take a look first. Chu Liuyue gently nodded. Su Li took a few steps forward and stretched out her hand. The moment her palm touched the door, she immediately felt that there was a gaze sweeping across her body. At this moment, it was as if her entire person was seen through. Su Li calmed down and exerted force on her hand. Creak! The door opened. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at Chu Liwei. I'm going in. Mr. Su, please be careful. Su Li nodded and walked in without hesitation. Then, the door closed again. Chu Liwei stared at the door for a while and turned to leave. At this moment, a slight fluctuation suddenly came from her dantian. For some reason, the water droplet floating quietly in his dantian started to ripple. Chu Liuyue's heart tightened and immediately suppressed it. She quickly turned around to take a look. Just now, there seemed to be a force that was calling her. She slowly clenched her hands in her sleeves and stood there waiting for a while. Seeing that nothing was wrong, she left. At the same time, in front of the empty black jade square, a figure suddenly appeared. It was the second messenger of God, Yu Qian. His expression was slightly serious as he stared at the black jade square in front of him. His eyes seemed to be surging with waves. He had only left for a short while and there was actually such a commotion here. Could it be? At this moment, light footsteps came from behind him. He immediately turned around to look. His eyes were extremely sharp, like a cold light piercing through. Su Li stopped in her tracks and looked at the man who suddenly appeared in front of her. Her heart was in her throat. This man was extremely dangerous. Moreover, he seemed to be extremely hostile towards her. However, she had only just arrived and had not even seen the other party. Where did this hostility come from? Who are you? Yu Qian asked in a low voice. Su Li suppressed her emotions and looked calm on the surface. She nodded and bowed. Her voice was calm and gentle. Su Li. Yu Qian frowned and his eyes swept across her face. Finally, his gaze fell on the letter at her waist. Are you new? Yes. Yu Qian stared at her for a long time before slowly saying, Refining saint? Su Li was shocked. Refining saints were different from martial artists. Their cultivation level was hidden very deeply. Outsiders basically could not see it. However, this man only looked at her for a while and guessed it directly. She nodded. The trace of worry in Yu Qian's heart disappeared. All the refining saints in the world had an inseparable close relationship with the palace of the illusory god. This meant that the fluctuation just now was caused by her. Go southwest. The fifth messenger of God will be in charge. Su Li felt that the dangerous aura of the other party disappeared in an instant. She was puzzled, but she did not ask. Thank you, messenger of God. Although she did not know the other party's ranking in the palace of the illusory god, to have such an aura, it must be the messenger of God. Yu Qian had already looked at the black jade square again. The flame at the top of the white jade pillar was much dimmer than before. He frowned. Digression, today, I have to go out and try to get to 6 o'clock. Chapter 2265. On the other side, Chang Wanzhou had already brought his men back to his residence. Due to the arrival of Rong Xiu and the others, the original courtyard was no longer big enough. However, Sin Yi had already tidied up the few courtyards beside them and was waiting for them to arrive. There were many courtyards in the Illusion God Palace, and the few courtyards beside them happened to be empty, so it was convenient for them. This commotion also attracted the attention of some people. Xiao Ran was originally sitting on his roof in boredom, staring at the star path and deep in thought. When he saw Chang Wanzhou coming over with his men, he was shocked, because he had never seen the people behind him before. On second thought, he remembered that Chu Luiyue seemed to have said that he would go back and invite the artifact refining Saint over. But why were there so many people? Seeing the group of people approaching, Xiao Ran touched his chin. These people are not weak, especially the young man in front, who was dressed in snow-white clothes. He was handsome and devilish, exuding a noble aura. If I'm not wrong, he should be that girl's husband? There was also the young man in black clothes behind him. He held a sword in one hand and looked cold and indifferent. He seemed to be a follower, but he had already broken through to the god realm. Xiao Ran was suddenly stunned and stared at Yan Qing a few more times. This person? Why does he look so familiar, as if I've seen him somewhere before? He frowned slightly and kept searching in his mind, but he couldn't find an answer. However, that familiar feeling lingered in his mind. At this moment, Yan Qing sensed his gaze and looked over. His facial features were handsome, but there was a faint coldness in his eyes. He was like a moving iceberg. In just an instant, Yan Qing retracted his gaze. Xiao Ran touched his chin. This person? I've never seen him before. Perhaps it was just my imagination? While Xiao Ran was secretly conflicted, Rong Xiu and the others had already arrived. Sin Yi was already waiting at the door. When he saw Rong Xiu and the others, he nodded slightly and bowed. Your Highness. Rong Xiu's gaze swept past him as he nodded and walked in. Xiao Ran didn't withdraw his gaze until all of them had entered the room. He frowned slightly. No matter how he looked at it, there didn't seem to be a problem. But bang! Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. Xiao Ran quickly raised his eyes to look over, only to see a silver stream of light soaring into the sky from the star passage. It quickly transformed into a profound formation in midair. Someone else is taking the star path? Xiao Ran's heart skipped a beat. He instantly soared into the air and looked over. When he saw it, he was overjoyed. Wasn't the woman who was currently standing on the star passage breaking the profound formation Chu Luiyue? She had just brought people back, and she was already trying to break the Xian formation? Isn't this a little too efficient? Just as Xiao Ran was thinking about this, he saw another ray of light fly up. Another Xian formation was successfully activated. He was taken aback. Little girl, how can you be so fast? The commotion on the star passage quickly attracted the attention of the other people in the illusory god palace. When they discovered that this person was still Chu Luiyue, many people were rather surprised. Isn't that Shang Guanyu? Why is she taking the star path again so quickly? It seems like only half a month has passed since she turned back halfway. In such a short time, she has already comprehended the profound formation of the Great Xian Emperor Division? Tise. She has already activated 2 profound formations consecutively. It's probably not right to say that she has only broken one, right? Other things aside, her talent as a Xian master is indeed very shocking. I wonder how far she can go this time? She probably came because she has a certain level of confidence. However, the number of profound formations in the Great Xian Emperor division is not small. She has only deciphered less than 1/10 of them. She might be able to walk for a while, but it probably won't be too long. Everyone had different opinions about Chu Liuyue's actions. Some were looking forward to it, while others disagreed. Chu Liuyue, who was standing on the star path, automatically ignored all these voices. She had originally planned to continue walking the star path after inviting Su Li over. To the current her, these profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division were no longer of any difficulty. The key was whether Su Li could find some information on her side. And during this period of time, she also planned to walk forward as much as possible. This way, if something happened, she could openly enter the illusory god palace with the fastest speed possible. With this thought, she lightly waved her hands in front of her. Several streams of light flew out and intertwined with each other. Not long after, another profound formation was deciphered. She took a step forward and continued forward. Time slowly passed. The number of onlookers also increased. Gradually, they finally realized that Chu Liuyue did not seem to have returned on a whim because she had deciphered a few profound formations at the last moment. She had clearly made preparations long ago. Seeing her decipher profound formations one after another and easily activate them, everyone's attitude rapidly changed. These profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division are not simple. She actually managed to draw them so smoothly and easily. In the crowd, someone could not help but mutter in a low voice, unable to conceal the shock in his voice. Previously, although her performance was very outstanding, most of those were profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division. It was not that no one in the illusory god palace could do it, but it might take a little longer. But this time was different. The difficulty of the profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division had increased by more than a little. Even if she had not rested during this period of time to study these, it should not be so heaven-defying, right? Mu Yafeng had also arrived at some point in time. However, she did not go to the very front and only chose a hidden corner to wait. From where she stood, she could see that Chu Liuyue was following the star path and was slowly approaching here. She was also getting closer and closer to the illusory god palace. When she looked carefully, she could even see the calmness in Chu Liuyue's eyes. It was very clear that these profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division that others found difficult to decipher did not pose any threat to her at all. Along the way, she had already activated more than 10 profound formations continuously without stopping to rest. But there was not the slightest bit of fatigue on her face. It seemed like she was just strolling leisurely. Mu Yafeng gritted her teeth. A few voices of discussion came from the side. Don't you guys feel that Shangguan Yu seems to be very relaxed when walking this segment of the star path? You think so too? I thought I was the only one who felt that way. From the beginning until now, how long has it been? She hasn't stuttered even once. The time she spent on each profound formation is very short. Even Mu Yafeng did not reach this level back then. Mu Yafeng can't compare to Shangguan Yu, right? She broke her record the last time. Sigh, if not for the fact that Shangguan Yu just came to the illusory god palace, I would have thought that she had already seen these profound formations. There seemed to be a ball of fire burning in Mu Yafeng's chest. She suddenly said, "How do you know that she hasn't seen them before?" Chapter 2266. Hearing her voice, those people turned their heads and looked over. They hadn't noticed it before, but now that Mu Yafeng took the initiative to speak, they realized that she had come here without them knowing. They immediately became nervous. Did she hear what they said just now? No matter what, Mu Yafeng was the most promising Xian master in the illusory god palace to complete the Star Road. Now that someone was performing better than her, how could she feel good? They looked at each other, and one of them finally couldn't help but ask, "Mu Yafeng, what do you mean by that? Could it be that Shangguan Yu has really seen these Xian formations? That's impossible. How long has she been in the illusory god palace? And this is her first time coming to this place on the Star Road. It's not good to say such things, right?" Another person said softly. Mu Yafeng smiled coldly. "What's there to not say? When she passed by the Xian King teacher's Xian formation, didn't she say that she had seen a portion of it before? They choked. Chu Luiyue did say that, but those Xian formations weren't very high level. Those who had some background in the Divine Ruins world might have seen many of them. There was nothing much to say about that. But the Xian King teacher's Xian formation was different. In the world, there was no place with more high-level Xian formations than the illusory God Palace. Even if she had seen them before, it was at most a portion. It was absolutely impossible for her to see all of them, let alone cover all the Xian formations on the Star Road. Do you really think that there's someone in this world who can instantly comprehend the Xian formations of the great Xian King teacher with just a glance? Mu Yafeng said softly with a calm expression. Their expressions changed. What do you mean by that? That's right. No matter how talented Chu Luiyue was, she shouldn't be so heaven-defying. If this continued, she could almost tie with the seventh divine emissary, right? One had to know that even the seventh divine emissary spent hundreds of years to complete the Star Road. This was also why he could become the seventh divine emissary. How long had Chu Luiyue been here? Wasn't this going too smoothly? Mu Yafeng said. I don't mean anything. Everyone has sharp eyes, and I don't need to say anything. These words made people even more suspicious. Suddenly, a young man beside him seemed to have thought of something. Oh right. I remember that Shangguan Yu has a good relationship with Zhen Bao Pavilion. Lord Ji seemed to have personally looked for her and invited her to the Treasure Pavilion. As soon as these words were spoken, it immediately caused quite a commotion. Really? Did His Excellency personally invite him? What kind of status does Lord Ji have? Why would he be so courteous to her? But she doesn't have a bloodline totem. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case, right? Of course it's true. I'm not the only one who saw it that day. Wait, did you forget that the Treasure Pavilion still has a copy of the mythical flame diagram? Could it be that she saw this? The crowd fell silent for a moment. They knew very well what the mythical flame diagram was. If that was the case, it wouldn't be difficult to explain all of this. However, there was another problem. The mythical diagram of flame is so precious. How can Shangguan Yu be qualified to read it? You want to buy it? That was impossible. Even a well-known figure like Mu Yafeng, who had been accumulating wealth for many years, didn't have enough capital to buy it. Needless to say, the others didn't. Could it be that His Excellency Ji is behind this? Someone whispered, but halfway through, he was suddenly interrupted. I say, what's the point of guessing here and there? Everyone, including Mu Yafeng, was shocked and turned around to look. Xiao Ran had appeared not far behind them. At this moment, he was leaning lazily against the wall with his arms crossed. He looked at them with a half-smile. Anyway, His Excellency Mingshu spends most of his time in the Treasure Pavilion. Isn't it better for you to go over and ask him? Everyone was speechless. His Excellency Mingshu always looked amiable, but everyone knew that he was not to be trifled with. Even the 8th Divine Envoy was not afraid of the Treasure Pavilion, let alone them. If they went over now, wouldn't they be making trouble for themselves? When Mu Yafeng saw Xiao Ran, a trace of fear flashed across her eyes. However, at this moment, Xiao Ran suddenly looked over. Mu Yafeng. The corners of his lips curled up. Others may not know why Shangguan Yu was able to progress so smoothly on the Star Road, but don't you know? Mu Yafeng's lips instantly turned pale. The people beside her looked at Mu Yafeng and then at Xiao Ran in confusion. What was he hinting at? However, Xiao Ran didn't say anything else. He turned his gaze and looked at Chu Luiyue. Actually, he was also very curious. How far could she go this time? Mu Yafeng clenched her fists and shut her mouth. The fact that Chu Luiyue was copying Xian formations for the Treasure Pavilion was considered a secret. If this was said by Chu Luiyue or the Treasure Pavilion, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if it was said by her, it was different. Although she was very unhappy with the fact that the Treasure Pavilion was biased towards Chu Luiyue, she wasn't stupid enough to offend them publicly. While he was arguing, Chu Luiyue had already cracked 3 more Xian formations. Many people were bewildered when they saw her stubbornly moving forward. Where can she go? Rong Xiu stood in the courtyard and looked up slightly. He could see the silver stream of light rushing into the sky. Xian formations quickly condensed and dissipated, and the distance kept moving forward. Obviously, she was getting closer and closer to the illusory god palace. Shangguan walked out of the house and lowered his eyes, as if in deep thought. He had just asked Tang Ku some questions. Ever since he saw Kong Qinglin break through to the weapon-refining Saint Realm with his own eyes, he vaguely felt that he was closer to that threshold. However, a little bit was still a little bit. Fortunately, Tang Ku was also here and gave him a lot of advice. He felt that he had comprehended something, but he was still lacking something to break through the window paper. Seeing Rong Xiu standing in the courtyard, he raised his voice and said, "Rong Xiu, you've just arrived at the illusory god palace. Why don't you walk around?" Chapter 2267. Hearing this, Rong Xiu looked back and smiled faintly. "Since I'm already here, there's no need to rush." Seeing that he was calm and composed, Shangguan was also relieved. Rong Xiu was extremely talented and resourceful. He probably already had his own plans and didn't need others to worry about him. Following his line of sight, Shangguan smiled. "It seems that your is going quite well." Rong Xiu nodded slightly. Those Xian formations were indeed nothing to her. Shangguan waved his hand. "Keep an eye on that girl and tell her not to be so anxious. I'll go into seclusion for the next few days." Previously, when Chu Luiwei wasn't here, he had been carefully watching over this group of people. Now that Rong Xiu was here, he could finally free up some time. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled slightly. "Don't worry." Only then did Shangguan return to his room. Illusory God Palace. Jin Yunlai walked out of the door and looked into the distance. She's continuing? The commotion on the Star Road wasn't small. It was hard for him not to know. After staring for a while, Jin Yunlai's expression gradually became serious. Chu Liuyue's speed was much faster than he expected. It seems that she's really obtained the mythical flame diagram? Jin Yunlai murmured softly. Previously, Mu Yafeng only sent a message saying that Treasure Pavilion had asked Chu Luiyue to copy the Xian formations on the second floor. But at that time, he wasn't sure which ones were which. But now, everything couldn't be clearer. If she hadn't read the mythical flame diagram, she wouldn't have been able to go so smoothly on the Star Road. It seems that Treasure Pavilion really values her. They're even willing to part with this thing. Jin Yunlai frowned slightly. But he was still puzzled. Because even so, she shouldn't be so fast. The further she went, the more complicated and difficult the profound formations became. However, her speed was not affected at all. This almost made people suspect that she had already memorized all the Xian formations in the entire Xian formation in her mind. But how is this possible? No matter how high her comprehension ability was, it shouldn't be this fast. Perhaps I should find a time to talk to Chu Luiyue. At this moment, a familiar fluctuation came from the front. Jin Yunlai's heart tightened. Then, a figure appeared in the void. The enchanting book and the crimson golden feather also flew out. Jin Yunlai quickly caught the item. "Lord Umo, why are you back so soon?" He had thought that he would have to wait for several days. Umo smiled faintly. "The Celestial Emperor already knows the names on the list. Naturally, it won't take long. What's more, the gate of heaven was still open, and there were many things that the seventh divine emissary had to take care of." Jin Yunlai said respectfully. "Yes." This was probably the Celestial Emperor's order. "If the Celestial Emperor has any other orders, I will inform you." Umo said. Jin Yunlai responded. Suddenly he thought of something and asked, "Lord Umo, wasn't it Lord Yanqing who was in charge of the palace of the illusory god? Why was it suddenly changed to Umo?" Umo said faintly, "Seventh divine emissary, this kind of thing shouldn't concern you, right?" Jin Yunlai was shocked. Only then did he realize that he had crossed the line and immediately took half a step back. "Lord Umo, please forgive me. I didn't mean to offend you." Umo stared at him for a while. "It's good that you know." After saying that, he turned and left. After a long time, Jin Yunlai let out a long sigh. Chapter 2268. Herb Mountain. Compared to the past, This place was much livelier now. Ever since Xu Jing was reprimanded in public and abolished many of the rules she had set, the celestial physician of the illusionary god palace was no longer restrained and could freely come and go to Herb Mountain. When Xu Jing arrived, she saw such a scene. She looked around and saw that almost every mountain was crowded with people. All kinds of medicinal herbs were constantly being picked. Although this was not the first time she had seen this scene, Xu Jing's heart still skipped a beat. In the past, if these people wanted to get these things, they would have to put in a lot of effort and try to curry favor with her. But now, they no longer put her in their eyes. Even when a few people walked past her, they only greeted her with a simple salute and left quickly. If it was in the past, Xu Jing took a deep breath and suppressed all the messy thoughts in her mind. Now that things had become like this, it was useless for her to think more. She did not want to give up the position of the 8th Divine Envoy. However, at this moment, she glanced out of the corner of her eye and suddenly saw many people heading towards a certain mountain peak. She was in a daze when she saw a woman leisurely walking over from afar. She was wearing a colorful dress, and her black hair fluttered in the wind. Her graceful figure was fully displayed as she moved. The colorful string on her wrist was decorated with small jade fragments. She only needed to lift her hand slightly to tuck her hair behind her ear, and the sound of the bracelet could be heard. Xu Jing's face immediately turned cold. Those people were obviously heading towards that woman. "Miss Little Hatchie, we meet again. What a coincidence." "Ha! Miss Little Hatchie, did you bring back enough medicinal herbs last time? What have you taken a fancy to today? Why don't I help you look?" "Miss Little Hatchie, I heard that you are quite interested and talented in refining medicine. Why don't we exchange pointers when we have time? How about it?" Extremely earnest voices could be heard one after another. Many young men came to Little Hatchie's side with eager faces. Little Hatchie plucked an ice lotus and smiled lazily. "I've been coming here every day recently, so it's not a coincidence that we've run into each other. Also, there are so many medicinal herbs here, I can take whatever I like. As for sparring..." She blinked, and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. Her beautiful eyes were flowing with light, and it was especially alluring. "I'm not that free. Most of these people were only grand physicians. How could they compare notes with her? If she had the time, she might as well go back and continue refining pills. Ever since she broke through to senior doctor, Big Brother really knew how to squeeze her dry." Thinking of this, she sighed sadly and resentfully. "Besides, I've been very tired recently." Everyone was originally embarrassed by her words, but when they saw her frown, they all felt sorry for her. "If that's the case, we won't disturb you any further." That's right. Little Hatchie, go back and rest as soon as you're done." Finally it was quiet. Little 8 blinked his eyes and smiled in satisfaction. Then he leisurely picked some herbs. These people were really interesting. Previously, because she had offended the 8th Divine Envoy, none of them dared to say a word. Now that the situation had reversed, they were no longer afraid and followed her. After choosing, she prepared to leave. However, just as she turned around, she felt a gaze that could not be considered kind fall on her. She stopped in her tracks and looked up. Then she smiled. "8th Divine Envoy, it's been a long time." Xu Jing did not want to pay much attention to her, but seeing the smile on her face, he felt that it was especially dazzling. Although the herb mountain is open now, the herbs inside are especially precious. If you can't make good use of them, it's better not to take so much. It's more appropriate to leave things for others who need them more. Little Hatchie was stunned. "8th Divine Envoy, why do you say that? Why did this medicinal herb become a waste in my hands?" Xu Jing looked at her coldly and indifferently. This woman was like a demon. All her thoughts were probably spent on her face. How could she have the time and energy to think about refining pills? With so many people disturbing you all day, you probably can't refine pills well. Xu Jing's words were tactful and sarcastic. He was just short of directly saying that Little Hatchie only thought about hooking up with men every day. The expressions of many people around them changed when they heard this. No matter what, it was not nice to say such things to a girl. Unexpectedly, Just when they all thought that little Hachi was going to flip out, little Hachi suddenly smiled. "Oh, 8th Divine Envoy, are you talking about this? You don't have to worry about this. Although it's a little annoying sometimes, I'm already used to it. People who don't catch my eye will definitely not disturb me. It's the same no matter how many people there are. Oh, I almost forgot. 8th Divine Envoy, you probably haven't experienced this before. That's why you think that people's hearts are so easily swayed." She took a step forward and tilted her head to smile. 8th Divine Envoy, if you've seen this many times like me, you'll naturally get used to it. Shu Jing was instantly furious. This little Hachi, was she mocking her? She was the 8th Divine Envoy. Of course, she could not be compared to this seductive girl. Hey, 8th Divine Envoy, I see that the dark circles under your eyes are getting heavier. Have you not been resting well recently? Well, if I were to be reprimanded in front of everyone, I reckon that I wouldn't be able to hold my head up high. Impudent. Hee, 8th Divine Envoy, don't be angry. I'm just joking with you. I've never been scolded by anyone before. Of course, I can't understand how you feel right now. If I've said something wrong, please be magnanimous and don't hold it against me. Shu Jing was already choked to the point that she could not say a word. Only a raging fire seemed to be burning in her chest. She could not wait to tear the girl in front of her apart. Little Hachi had already waved her small hand and lifted her feet to leave. The medicinal ingredients this time are enough for a while. I'll come back after a while. 8th Divine Envoy, let's meet again another day. After successfully choking Shu Jing, little Hachi was in a good mood. She happily returned to her residence. However, before she reached her destination, she saw a person standing at the intersection. She stopped in her tracks. That person had already seen her. After hesitating for a moment, he came forward to greet her. "Miss Little Hachi." Little Hachi looked at him in surprise. "Lianghe? Why are you here again? Didn't he run away because of her anger? Didn't he say that he would never look for her again?" "Why?" Lianghe's face turned red. "Miss Little Hachi, I was reckless that day. Please don't take it to heart. After I went back that day, I've thought about it carefully. Little Hachi is a peerless beauty with countless admirers. I really don't have the qualifications to ask little Hachi to like me." He hesitated for a while before he spoke with difficulty. "Miss Little Hachi, I've thought about it. Your proposal that day. I can accept it." Little Hachi? Digression, in the end, a bootlicker will end up with nothing. Chapter 2269. Is Lianghe crazy? The corner of little Hachi's mouth twitched as she took half a step back. "This isn't too good, right?" Lianghe hurriedly said, "Lady Little Hachi, I remember you said that the person you like isn't in the Illusion God Palace, right? If he doesn't come, then, Lady Little Hachi, can you consider me for a while?" Little Hachi took half a step back. "You mean, you want this lady to be with you first, and when he comes, you can leave?" Lianghe's face was extremely embarrassed, but he still nodded. When he heard Little Eight's words that day, he was indeed extremely angry in his heart. That was why he left angrily after saying those harsh words. But these days, Little Hachi's figure kept appearing in his mind. He couldn't sleep with anyone, and he couldn't do anything else. His entire mind was in a mess. Thus, after thinking for a while, he finally made this extremely difficult decision. Although he also felt that this was very bad, after saying it out loud, his heart felt a bit more relaxed. Of course, he also had his own plans. What kind of place was the Illusion God Palace? How could he come and go as he pleased? Who knows, that person might never come. Even if he came, it wasn't as if he didn't have a way to deal with him. Little Hachi saw that his expression was firm, as if he was really going to do this. She immediately felt unwell. What was this called? After waiting for Little Hachi's reply for a long time, Lianghe was also a bit nervous. "Lady Little Hachi, what do you think?" Little Hachi." Suddenly, a calm and cold voice came from behind him. Little Hachi raised her head and saw that a person had already opened the door to the courtyard. He was holding a sword with both hands and standing upright, looking over with an indifferent expression. It was Yan Qing. Little Hachi widened her eyes in shock, almost suspecting that she had seen wrongly. Wasn't this person in the Peach Blossom Cove? Why did he suddenly come here? After thinking for a moment, she immediately realized something. You followed His Highness here? Yan Qing nodded. His expression was still handsome and cold. His eyes swept across the two, stopping for a moment on Liang He. Nani? Liang He's face filled with astonishment. You know me? Yan Qing said indifferently, I've heard of you. Liang He was even more puzzled. This person didn't seem to be from the Illusion God Palace. You are. From the looks of it, he came from the courtyard and seemed to be very familiar with little 8. Yan Qing. Liang He looked, Yan's His Highness Tian, Ants Hachi He's, of was, she, T's, sheet. She said softly, Yan Qing, you're finally here. I've been waiting for so long. Yan Qing's body stiffened. He wanted to push her hand away, but when he looked down and saw her beautiful eyes, he suddenly stopped. Liang He was also stunned. Miss Little Hachi, you are. During this period of time, he had some understanding of Little Hachi. Although she was enchanting and beautiful, in reality, she was very distant and polite when interacting with other people. Apart from Chu Luiyue and a few others, she was indifferent to most people. She didn't even bother to talk to them. Not to mention such an intimate attitude. Little Hachi moved forward, intending to hug Yan Qing's arm. However, Yan Qing was holding his sword with both hands, motionless. It was like an iron cylinder defense. She raised her head and glared at him. She reached out and pinched his waist. Give me your arm. Hurry up. Would it kill him to cooperate with her? However, she didn't manage to twist it. Yan Qing's waist was thin. Under his thin clothes, there were tough muscles. Her pinch was like a toy to him. Yan Qing lowered his eyes to look at her. Little Hachi threw 2 daggers at him. Yan Qing let go of his arm. Little Hachi immediately took advantage of the situation. Her slender white arms held his arm, and she moved closer to him. Her skin was really too white. Under the sunlight, it glowed with a clear and lustrous light. It was as if a slight force would leave a mark on it. Yan Qing calmly looked away. Little Hachi had already turned around to look at Liang He. Now, is it clear enough? Liang He's face turned pale. He didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, she would come after he had just gritted his teeth and made such a difficult decision. He paused for a moment before asking, Is this the person you said you liked before? Yan Qing's eyebrows twitched. Then, he heard the woman beside him laugh softly. Yan Qing lowered his eyes slightly. Look, her appearance, figure, and temperament. Which one of them isn't the best? Little Hachi said as she tapped the back of Yan Qing's hand. I remember that you've broken through to God before, right? Yan Qing paused. Yes. Little Hachi immediately raised her eyebrows and smiled proudly. Very good. What she wanted was to crush him. Liang He, now, do you still want to compete? If you were me, who would you choose? Liang He choked and couldn't say anything. It was one thing to hear about it before, and another to see it with his own eyes. If this person hadn't come, he could still convince himself, but now, she saw such a man standing beside her, and she was intimately leaning against him. The two of them were so close that there was no gap between them, just like a perfect couple. If he continued to pester her, he would really become the joke of the entire Illusion God Palace. Liang He gritted his teeth, but his face was pale. If he had known earlier, Liang He, right? Before he could continue, Yan Qing's arm dropped and grabbed Little Hachi's hand. His palm was hot, and Little Hachi immediately shivered and looked back at him in surprise. Yan Qing's expression was as cold as before. He looked at Liang He and said lightly, Since she has already rejected you, please respect yourself. From today onwards, you are not allowed to be within 10 steps of her. Otherwise, you don't want to know how fast my sword is. The last sentence was cold and heavy, and it was a naked threat. Liang He's face turned red, and he was extremely embarrassed. But he was a celestial doctor. Unless he couldn't take it anymore, he wouldn't fight with a venerable god expert. Yan Qing was too lazy to care about his reply. He pulled little Hachi and turned around. Little Hachi, let's go. Little 8 blinked. Seeing Liang He's defeated expression, and knowing that he wasn't going to chase after them, little 8 happily followed him. The courtyard's door was quickly closed. Liang He stood there for a while. Feeling extremely embarrassed, he finally left in a hurry. Little 8 turned his head to take a look and saw that he had already fled. Instantly, he narrowed his eyes in satisfaction and smiled. To deal with this kind of person, she had to use ruthless moves. Although she was shocked when he agreed to her suggestion, after thinking about it carefully, she felt that something was wrong. Liang He was the youngest supreme doctor in the Illusion God Palace. How could he really do this? As soon as Yan Qing appeared, he was forced to retreat. She turned around. Lord Yan Qing, many thanks. I couldn't tell that you were quite sensible. Yan Qing let go of her hand. His fingertips seemed to still have that delicate and smooth touch, as well as a faint wisp of her fragrance. He said softly, "It's nothing. Don't mention it." Chapter 2270. Little Hachi pursed her red lips. There was nothing wrong with Yan Qing. He was just as cold as an iceberg all day long. He was so serious that he was almost stubborn. She thanked him sincerely, but he was still so polite. She yawned. "Then I won't disturb you, Mr. Yan Qing. I'll go back first." She had just taken a step when Yan Qing called her again. "Miss Little Hachi." Little Hachi paused and looked back at him. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. "What did you call me just now?" Yan Qing was stunned. "Miss Little Hachi. That's not right. You just called me Little 8. Little Hachi walked forward and came to Yan Qing. She tilted her head and looked at him. "Why did you call me Little Hachi now? You sound so unfamiliar." She thought they were already familiar with each other. Yan Qing paused for a moment. There was a reason just now. Little Hachi stared at him for a while and snorted. "Forget it. Call me whatever you want." She couldn't teach this person in a short time. After solving a small problem, Little 8's mood was still very good. Moreover, it could be said that he owed Yan Qing a favor. "Please take care of me in the future, Mr. Yan Qing. If something like this happens again, please remember to help me, Mr. Yan Qing." Yan Qing's expression changed slightly. "In the future? This is not appropriate, is it?" How could Little 8 not know what he was thinking? His lips curled up. "Mr. Yan Qing, you're not married, and I'm not married. What's wrong with this?" She didn't care about those people, but as time passed and there were more and more people, she would be annoyed occasionally. Now that Yan Qing was here, wouldn't it save her a lot of trouble? Yan Qing looked at her and asked, "If one day Little Hachi girl meets someone she likes, then I'll explain to him when the time comes." Little Hachi patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry, I won't implicate others because of this." Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes widened slightly. Could it be that Lord Yan Qing already has someone he likes? If that was the case, then it was indeed inappropriate for her to do so. Yan Qing looked at her and his Adam's apple bobbed. Little Hachi was relieved and smiled again. That's good, that's good. I'll take my leave first. I won't disturb Lord Yan Qing." As he spoke, he walked towards his room. After a long time, Yan Qing withdrew her gaze and rubbed her fingertips gently. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiyue was still moving forward on the star path. She had already deciphered almost all of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations. The one in front of her was the last one. As long as she successfully executed this, it would mean that she had completed 4/5 of the entire star path and officially stepped into the path of a Grand Master's profound formation. The surrounding people were also waiting with bated breath. At this point, Chu Liuyue's talent and strength were already beyond doubt. Even if she didn't have a bloodline totem, everything she had displayed so far was enough to make people exclaim in admiration. Previously, when she broke Mu Yafeng's record, everyone thought that she was at most a little stronger than Mu Yafeng. But looking at it now, how was it just a little? Chu Luiyue had clearly left Mu Yafeng far behind. Bang! A silver stream of light flew up. A profound formation instantly condensed above Chu Liuyue's head. She raised her head slightly and took a look. Then she let out a long breath. Actually, her mental energy and strength were also greatly exhausted at this time. Her lips were somewhat pale. She closed her eyes and adjusted the aura in her body. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Is she going to stop? She can't not stop. Isn't she a Grand Xian King teacher? The profound formations in front are all at the Grand Master level. That's true. But even so, she's still really powerful. This speed, if it were me, I really wouldn't dare to think about it. If she also had a bloodline totem, what would Mu Yafeng do? I reckon that the 7th divine emissary would also treat her differently. What a pity. All kinds of discussions came one after another. There were also some people who quietly looked at Mu Yafeng and observed her expression. It was just that Mu Yafeng was expressionless at this time, so they couldn't see anything. Of course, she was definitely unhappy. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't be happy at this time. How could Mu Yafeng not know that these people were looking at her? All these years, because she was highly regarded by the 7th divine emissary, she was pursued by many people and also secretly envied by many people. There were definitely many people who were waiting to see her make a fool of herself. So no matter what, she definitely couldn't show anything at this time. Seeing that the last profound formation of a Grand Xian King teacher was also displayed, Mu Yafeng's hands and her sleeves clenched into a ball. It didn't matter. She was only a Grand Xian King teacher. Even if she had already seen the mythical flame diagram, it was impossible for her to comprehend those profound formations in such a short time. How could that threshold be crossed so easily? Thinking of this, Mu Yafeng's mood finally improved a little. She turned around and planned to leave. However, at this time, the surrounding crowd suddenly became restless. Many people sucked in cold air and let out waves of exclamations. Mu Yafeng immediately felt uneasy and turned around to look. This look finally caused the calm expression on her face to crack. A trace of shock and disbelief flowed out from between her brows. The woman standing on the star path didn't leave as everyone expected. Instead, after a short rest, she continued forward. Without the slightest hesitation, she stepped in. At the same time, a spot of light suddenly lit up. A Grand Master Profound Formation. Chapter 2271. Without any hesitation, she stepped into the path of the great Grandmaster Xian formation. Countless streams of light flew out from her hands and quickly intertwined with each other to draw an extremely complicated Xian formation. Many people were dazzled just by looking at it. However, from the beginning to the end, Chu Liuyue's movements did not have the slightest hesitation or pause. Every ray of light seemed to have its own consciousness as they landed where they were supposed to be. After a while, the outline of a Xian formation appeared in front of her. The lines on it were also quickly filling in and outlining. She's actually trying to use a great Grandmaster Xian formation? After the initial commotion, the surrounding crowd quieted down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at this scene without blinking, afraid that they would miss something. Mu Yafeng was also watching. However, the more she watched, the more panicked she felt. From the looks of it, Chu Liuyue did not seem to be using a great Grandmaster Xian formation for the first time. Could it be that she's hiding her strength? Mu Yafeng could not help but murmur softly. Other than this answer, she could not think of any other reasonable explanation. However, Chu Liuyue was a god and had just broken through to Supreme Doctor. How could she still be a great Grandmaster? Even if the illusory God Palace gathered all the top geniuses in the world, there had never been such a heaven-defying person. Illusory God Palace. When Chu Liuyue stepped forward and began to try to use a great Grandmaster Xian formation, Jin Yunlai knew about it. He stood with his hands behind his back and stared in the direction of the star path. After a moment, he no longer hesitated and walked outside. Even if she did not have a bloodline totem, such talent was extremely rare. He had to make a trip there personally. When he passed by the Black Jade Square, he glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw Yu Qian standing there. Jin Yunlai stopped in his tracks, half-turned, and bowed in Yu Qian's direction. Second Divine Envoy. Yu Qian asked, "Are you planning to meet Shengguan Yu?" Jin Yunlai was not surprised that he guessed it and nodded. "Yes." Yu Qian smiled. "I heard that he's not even 20 years old yet. To be able to perform so well, it's indeed rare." Jin Yunlai looked at him strangely. Yu Qian's standards were actually very high. There weren't many people in the entire illusory god palace that could receive such praise from him. "Just go ahead. After she finishes walking the Star Road, bring her to Fengming Mountain and say that I want to see her." Jin Yunlai was shocked. "Fengming Mountain?" Yu Qian nodded and laughed. "You probably don't know, but the current young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is her contracted magical beast." Jin Yunlai walked out of the illusory shrine with mixed feelings and followed the star path. The moment he appeared on the star passage, he immediately attracted the attention of many people. "The seventh divine emissary is here. Are you here for Shengguan Yu? That must be it, right? After all, Shengguan Yu is the only one on the star passage. With such talent and performance, the seventh divine emissary would have already arrived if it were someone else. It's just that Shengguan Yu doesn't have a bloodline totem, so it's been delayed until now." Mu Yafeng heard the commotion and immediately looked up. When she saw that it was really Jin Yunlai, she pursed her lips and dug her nails into her palms. "Even this person is here. Is Chu Luiwei really going to make a comeback?" Bang! A loud explosion sounded. Mu Yafeng turned around in realization and saw a silver profound formation that was much bigger than the one before. It was also much brighter and more dazzling than before. It was like a flower blooming in midair. The bright light illuminated the surroundings, and it also added a layer of faint light to Chu Luiwei, who was standing below. Everyone was silent. The Grandmaster Xian formation was completed. This also meant that Chu Luiwei had officially broken through to the Grandmaster Xian formation. Mu Yafeng's face turned pale and she almost couldn't stand straight. She had suffered too many blows during this period of time. Moreover, they all came from the same person. Every time she thought that she had guessed Chu Luiwei's true cultivation level, the other party would display even more shocking abilities. Looking at the great Grandmaster's Xian formation that had been successfully unleashed, there was a moment where she was completely stunned. She wasn't the only one. Most of the onlookers felt the same way, including Jin Yunlai. He couldn't help but frown as he looked at the woman in a red dress with her hair flying in the wind. "You deliberately concealed your strength before this?" Chu Luiwei looked up. The Xian formation was displayed perfectly and it was a good start. Only when she heard Jin Yunlai's voice did she retract her gaze, and the corners of her lips raised into a brilliant arc. "No, why would the seventh divine emissary say that?" Jin Yunlai didn't believe her. "If you weren't a grandmaster, how could you have comprehended this Xian formation in such a short time? Even a grandmaster would need at least a month to do so. She hadn't even been in the illusory god palace for that long." Chu Luiwei smiled lightly. "Seventh divine emissary, I believe you can tell if I'm hiding my strength or not. As for how I did it in such a short time, the reason is simple. I'm very talented." Jin Yunlai, everyone, no one could refute this answer. Looking at Chu Luiwei's magnanimous and relaxed appearance, Jin Yunlai's heart wavered. Could it be that I really underestimated her before? When she walked the star path last time, I did pay attention. She was indeed a Grandmaster Xian. Did she really break through recently? But this was too, Jin Yunlai frowned. He suddenly understood why the Precious Treasures Pavilion had chosen her. If what she said was true, then the aptitude she possessed was extremely terrifying. Jin Yunlai stared at her for a while and asked again, "Do you still want to continue?" Chu Luiwei glanced ahead. The Xian formations in this area were relatively simple and wouldn't take too much effort. Jin Yunlai's arrival at this time seemed a little unusual. "No." She shook her head and looked at Jin Yunlai. "Seventh divine emissary, are you looking for me for something?" Jin Yunlai knew that she was very smart, so she didn't hide it and simply nodded. "Come with me." After saying that, she turned and walked towards the illusory god palace. Chu Luiwei was stunned. Jin Yunlai had always looked down on her. It was the first time that he took the initiative to look for her like today. Moreover, why was he still walking towards the illusory god palace? Was there anything that he couldn't say here? Chu Liyue's mind raced. Without any hesitation, she followed him. After the two left, the originally silent crowd suddenly became restless and all kinds of guesses were made. Mu Yafeng was annoyed and turned to leave. On the other side, Chu Liyue followed Jin Yunlai all the way. Jin Yunlai didn't say anything along the way, so Chu Liyue tactfully kept quiet. The two, one in front and one behind, arrived at the gate of the illusory god palace again. Then Jin Yunlai turned and walked to the right. Chapter 2272. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. This was the end of the star path, and further ahead was the magnificent and sacred palace of the illusory god. Other than that, there was only the rolling mountain range behind them. They were obviously not going to the palace of the illusory god. Chu Liyue hesitated for a moment and finally asked, "Seventh Oracle, where are we going now?" Jin Yunlai didn't even turn his head. Fengming Mountain. Chu Liyue was stunned. Fengming Mountain? What's that place? Jin Yunlai didn't stop walking. "You'll know when we get there." His voice was as cold as ever, as if he didn't want to say more. Chu Liyue's lips moved, and she swallowed the rest of her words. "Yes." Chu Liyue continued to follow Jin Yunlai. They were walking along the outer wall of the palace of the illusory god. Because it was still cold and cheerless, there was no one else on the wide road except for the two of them. After all, this was still the territory of the palace of the illusory god. After walking for a while, Jin Yunlai finally stopped. In front of the two of them, there was a translucent barrier that blocked the road. A faint pressure was emitted from it. Even though Chu Liyue was already a venerable god expert, she still felt a sense of suffocation in her chest. She frowned slightly and quietly became alert. "This time, the second oracle wants to see you. You should think about what to say later." Jin Yunlai finally turned around to look at her and said indifferently. Chu Liyue was stunned. The second oracle? This identity was already the second in command of the oracles, and even Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing had to treat him with respect. But such a person actually wanted to see her at this time? In an instant, countless guesses flashed through Chu Liyue's mind, but her face was as calm as ever. "Thank you for your guidance, seventh oracle." Jin Yunlai nodded when she saw that she was neither servile nor overbearing. Other than his bloodline totem, Chu Liyue's performance in other aspects was flawless. He raised his chin. "Go in." Chu Liyue felt a little strange. "The seventh oracle is not coming with us?" Jin Yunlai narrowed her eyes. "This is Phoenix Cry Mountain, adjacent to the illusory god palace, and also one of the forbidden areas of the entire illusory god palace. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter." He couldn't do it either. Chu Liyue revealed a look of understanding, but secretly snorted in his heart. It turned out that this was the forbidden area that Jin Yunlai had mentioned before. However, he said that it was one of the forbidden areas. The illusory god palace had quite a few forbidden areas. She collected her thoughts and walked forward. She took a step forward, and her figure disappeared behind the barrier. Seeing that she had entered, Jin Yunlai frowned and remained silent for a while. He had always felt that it was inappropriate for the Yu Qian to meet Chu Liyue here. However, the Yu Qian was the second oracle after all. In the current illusory god palace, he had a lot of authority. Especially now that the first oracle had been in seclusion, many things had fallen into the hands of the second oracle. Jin Yunlai suddenly remembered what Xu Jing had said before. The gate of heaven had already opened. Logically speaking, the first oracle should have come out. He pondered for a long time before turning around and leaving. At this moment, Chu Liyue passed through the barrier and came inside. She stood still and looked forward. She was stunned. In front of her was a steep and tall mountain. However, there was not a single blade of grass on this mountain. It was just a charred and bare area. It looked as if it had just experienced a big fire. Even the area at the foot of the mountain was barren. There was no sign of life. Standing here and looking at this scene, she seemed to be able to smell the faint burning smell in the air. However, when she looked carefully, She found that many of the stones on the mountain had been polished with traces of vicissitudes. Even if something had really happened here, it did not seem to have happened recently. She suddenly thought of something and looked back. The magnificent illusory god palace was right behind her. However, there was a translucent barrier falling from the sky, separating the illusory god palace and this place. It was as if they were two different worlds. In an instant she understood something. This so-called Fengming Mountain was actually the back mountain of the illusory god palace. The rumors that she had heard before suddenly appeared in her mind. That's right. Xiao Ran once said that tens of thousands of years ago, the illusory god palace had experienced a big fire that almost burned half of the palace. The current illusory god palace took 1,000 years to repair with great difficulty. It was also at that time that the crimson gold celestial phoenix, the guardian beast of the palace, defected from the illusory god palace. Since then, it implicated the entire clan and became sinners. Could it be that this Fengming Mountain was also? It seems that you are quite interested in the illusory god palace. A gentle and young voice suddenly came. Chu Luiyue looked back vigilantly and saw a person coming from the scorched Fengming Mountain. His speed was very fast. In a few breaths he arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. When he arrived, there was not even the slightest fluctuation of energy around him. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. This person's strength was definitely above the god realm. She quickly sized up the man in front of her. He looked to be in his 20s, handsome and gentle. It was really hard to imagine that he was the second divine envoy who controlled the life and death of countless people. At this time, Yu Qian was also looking at her. A faint wave of emotion flashed through his eyes. Greetings, second divine envoy. Chu Luiyue bowed her head respectfully and politely. Yu Qian came back to his senses and slowly smiled. I asked you to come here today because I have something to tell you. He raised his finger and pointed at the Fengming Mountain behind him. Do you know where this place is? Chu Luiyue was startled. Wasn't this the Fengming Mountain? Where else could it be? As if seeing through her thoughts, Yu Qian smiled and said, That's right. In the past, the guardian beast of the Divine Master, the crimson gold celestial phoenix, was raised here. Chapter 2273. Divine Master. Chu Luiyue's pupils suddenly shrank. Almost instantly, she understood that the Divine Master that Yu Qian mentioned must be the true master of the palace of the illusory god. So, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix ancestor was not only the guardian beast of the palace, but also the Divine Master personally took care of it? To be able to leave the back mountain of the palace of the illusory god to it, it was enough to show the trust and love that the Divine Master had for it. But she didn't know what happened later that caused the Divine Master to betray and even directly burn down the palace of the illusory god. As it was related to the heavy secrets of the past, Chu Luiyue tactfully didn't answer. Yu Qian put one hand behind his back, slightly raised his head, looked at Fengming Shan, and sighed softly. The Divine Master treated Yi Ling very well, but unfortunately, it let the Divine Master down. Chu Luiyue slightly pursed her lips. Yi Ling. This should be the name of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix ancestor. Hearing Yu Qian's words, it seemed that everything was as the rumors said back then. Who knew what the truth was? Yu Qian chuckled when he saw that she had remained silent. You don't have to be nervous. I didn't mean anything by saying this. I just felt emotional when I saw you. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. What was so good about her that made him feel emotional? She wasn't naive enough to think that Yu Qian, the second divine envoy of the palace of the illusory god, was really just emotional when he mentioned the past in front of her. Such a person's scheming methods were top-notch. Even if it was a sigh, a look, it was usually full of deep meaning. If it wasn't for another purpose, he wouldn't have let her come, let alone mention these things to someone like her who didn't even have a bloodline totem. Yu Qian nodded and said, Yes. Didn't you contract with the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? His expression and eyes were clearly very gentle, as if he was chatting casually with a close friend. However, Chu Luiyue clearly sensed an extremely dangerous icy aura, which instantly enveloped her. Her entire body tensed up. She looked up and fixed her gaze on Yu Qian. She felt a chill run down her spine. At this moment, even the air seemed to freeze. After a while, Chu Luyue gently nodded. I contracted a crimson gold heavenly phoenix and it has been with me for many years. Why did the second messenger suddenly ask about this? Yu Qian revealed a satisfied expression. He always liked to deal with honest people. He laughed. That's no ordinary crimson gold heavenly phoenix. You have to know that in the past 10,000 years, the entire crimson gold sky phoenix clan has only produced 2 people with the purest bloodline. One is Yi Ling, and the other is the one you contracted. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. Actually, I invited you here today to tell you something. I hope you can break the contract with that crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Yu Qian's tone was very calm, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. Chu Luyue noticed that he didn't have any intention of compromising in his words. The corners of her lips curled up slightly as she asked with a faint smile. Second messenger, can I say no? Yu Qian's expression was gentle. I'm afraid not. Chu Luyue shut her mouth. She knew that the other party's attitude was firm. It was useless to continue talking. The other party was the second messenger. His status and strength were much higher than hers. She didn't seem to have any conditions to negotiate with the other party. After a long while, Chu Luyue asked, Second messenger, what if I don't agree? Yu Qian said, That's a pity. I heard that Taizu of yours has a chance of breaking through to become a refining saint. And those subordinates are also quite talented. By the way, it seems that you brought your husband with you this time? Chu Liuyue's eyes turned completely cold. Master, the 7th messenger has asked the princess to leave. Yan Qing walked into the room and saw Rong Xiu sitting by the window. There was a chess set in front of him. He was holding a black chess piece between his slender fingers. He seemed to be hesitating where to put it. When he heard Yan Qing's words, he didn't even raise his head. He only said, yes. Yan Qing frowned slightly. After a moment of hesitation, she said, I'm afraid that the second messenger is the one who wants to see the princess. I know. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows as he spoke. Then he raised his head and looked out of the window. He has always been calm. It's rare for him to lose his composure. It seems that the situation is not good. Yan Qing was even more worried. Master, with his character, once he is forced into a corner, I'm afraid that he will do anything. When that time comes, the princess will be in even more danger. Of course he will be anxious. The gate of heaven has been opened for nearly 2 months. There is not much time left for him. Rong Xiu said lightly. Pa. The black chess piece was placed, instantly killing the white chess piece's last chance of survival. If he wants to hit the wall, let him go. There is no need to stop him. Yan Qing was shocked. Then she suddenly realized something and nodded slightly. Yes. Fengming Mountain. Hearing Chu Liuyue's answer, Yu Qian was not angry. Instead, he smiled slightly. After all, it is an ancient divine beast with a pure bloodline. It is normal that you are not willing to part with it. If it were me, I would not make this decision easily. How about this? I will use a condition to make an exchange with you. What do you want? Just say it. If it were others, they would probably think that Yu Qian was easy to talk to. But Chu Luyue did not think so. This made her even more vigilant. In comparison, Yu Qian had the absolute right to speak in front of her. Even if she did not agree, could Yu Qian not do anything to her? But when he heard her refusal, not only did he not force her, he even took a step back. This matter itself was full of strangeness. Seeing that Chu Luyue did not speak for a long time, Yu Qian said again, I see that you seem to be very interested in the palace of the illusory god. If you want to come in, just nod your head. And I can guarantee that you will be treated well in the palace of the illusory god in the future. Chu Luyue smiled. The second divine envoy is right. I do want to enter the palace of the illusory god. However, as long as I finish the star path, I can achieve this goal. Why should I use dumpling to exchange? Yu Qian suddenly laughed as if he had heard a joke. Shangguan Yu, even if you break all the Xian formations on the star path, it is useless. Because you don't have a bloodline totem, the door of the palace of the illusory god will never open for you. Chu Liwei did not say anything. However, if you are willing to break the contract with that crimson gold sky phoenix, I can let you have a bloodline totem. In this way, you can enter the palace of the illusory god and even become a god in the future. Why not? Chu Liwei was shocked. Yu Qian's words meant, I heard that Mu Yafeng offended you before? Her bloodline power is not bad. If you don't mind, you can choose her. Of course, if you don't like her, there are many other choices in the palace of the illusory god. Yu Qian took a step forward and looked down at her with a smile on his lips. As long as you agree to my conditions, all of this will be within your reach. Chapter 2275. If it was anyone else who spoke to Yu Qian like this, they might have already been beheaded. But Dumpling was different. Yu Qian wasn't angry when he heard this. Instead, he was curious. He sized up Dumpling for a while, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable admiration. She's not even an adult yet, but she can already take human form. She really has a pure bloodline. Previously, he had only heard about it, but now that he saw it with his own eyes, he knew how heaven-defying this crimson gold heavenly phoenix was. No wonder Yi Zhao didn't hesitate to freeze and seal the divine phoenix mountain, causing all the clansmen to fall into a deep sleep and refuse to hand her over. Your Dumpling? The impatience and frustration in Yu Qian's heart dissipated. His voice was even gentler and more polite than when he was talking to Chu Liwei. Dumpling hugged Chu Liwei's neck tightly and was extremely vigilant. You're not allowed to call my name. Chu Liwei patted her back lightly and wiped away the tears hanging at the corner of her eyes as she coaxed her. Dumpling, don't cry. Yu won't abandon you. Dumpling pursed her lips as if she was about to cry again, but she held it in and nodded vigorously. I want to be with Yu. Looking at the scene in front of him, Yu Qian frowned slightly. According to his previous plan, after letting Chu Liwei and Dumpling break the contract, he would completely cut off all contact between the two. But now, it seemed that he was facing a lot of pressure. Chu Liwei was fine, but the key was Dumpling. She was still young and only had Chu Liwei in her eyes. If he forcefully snatched her away, he was afraid that she would really do something ruthless. Absolutely not. A crimson gold heavenly phoenix with a pure bloodline was extremely rare. He had waited for so many years for this one. No matter what, there couldn't be any problems. After hesitating for a long time, he finally said, Since you guys are so insistent, then you'll each take a step back. From now on, you can come here once a month. Second messenger, I said at any time. Chu Liwei emphasized. Yu Qian paused. Half a month. Chu Liwei smiled. Second divine envoy, you are so insincere. It is very difficult for me to agree to your request. Yu Qian gritted his teeth. It was rare for him to lose control like this, but the woman in front of him was really, the two sides were in a deadlock for a long time. Finally Yu Qian said, Good. I promise you. In any case, Fengming Mountain was surrounded by a barrier, and there weren't many people here. If she wanted to come, she could just come. What could she possibly do? However, I have to warn you in advance. Phoenix Cry Mountain was a holy land for cultivation for crimson gold heavenly phoenixes. However, this was not the case for the human race. If you insist on coming, I won't stop you as long as you can handle it, Yu Qian said in a deep voice. The corner of Chu Liu's lips curled up. You don't have to worry about that. Yu Qian looked at her deeply. However, she had already looked at Dumpling in her arms and comforted her softly. Dumpling, don't be afraid. Just treat it as a change of place to cultivate. In any case, I will often come over to accompany you. Bean-sized crystal tears rolled down from Dumpling's eyes again. Her small body was sobbing, but she didn't say anything else. She only nodded her head while choking with sobs. All right. She knew that this was the best choice for the current situation. Chu Liwei kissed the space between her eyebrows with heartache. Dumpling, be good. Seeing this, the Yu Qian didn't say anything else. With a wave of his sleeve, a palm-sized white jade token flew out. This is my token. If you want to come to Feng Ming Mountain in the future, you can use this. Chu Luiwei caught the white jade token. Thank you, second messenger. No need. Yu Qian raised his chin. Now, you can cancel the contract. Hearing this, Dumpling instantly hugged Chu Luiwei even tighter. Chu Luiwei coaxed her for a while more before Dumpling reluctantly let go and stood in front of her. The two of them faced each other. Chu Luiwei looked deeply at Dumpling, then closed his eyes. She gently raised her hand, and a scarlet gold light suddenly flew out from her palm, heading straight for Dumpling. Dumpling's small shoulders trembled, and she also stretched out her hand with red eyes. The same ray of light flew out from her hand. The two rays of light converged and connected in midair, and the pressure was faintly discernible. Yu Qian watched from the side, his eyes moving slightly. The aura of the purest bloodline was indeed different. Even Yi Zhao, who had opened his seventh meridian, could not be compared to it. Although he had been checkmated by Chu Luiwei, it was all worth it. Bang! A faint shattering sound was heard. The two rays of light that were connected to each other were also annihilated. Yu Qian's heart settled. In this way, the contract between Chu Luiwei and Dumpling was completely cancelled. He lifted his leg and walked forward. Dumpling, follow me. As he spoke, he had already reached out his hand. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly froze. A rune gradually flashed between Dumpling's brows. Immediately after, a familiar aura came from her body. When he saw this, Yu Qian's brows furrowed tightly. He quickly turned around and looked at Chu Luiwei. His gaze was cold and sharp like a knife. When it landed on a person's body, it was almost bone-piercing. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately looked up. Their gazes met, and in an instant, sparks seemed to fly in all directions. Yu Qian's gaze was solid, and it carried a powerful pressure that crushed over. He asked word by word, "Shengguan Yu, is your contract really cancelled?" Chu Luiwei's heart instantly tightened. Digression, 6 p.m. Chapter 2276. After a short moment of silence, she said, "Of course." She and Dumpling didn't have an ordinary contract to begin with. Now that she said it was cancelled, it was just to save some face. Could the Yu Qian really see something? Then what's with the aura in her body? The Yu Qian's eyes were full of scrutinizing pressure as he stared at Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei's eyebrows twitched slightly. Just as he was about to ask, Dumpling asked crisply, "Hey, are you talking about this?" The Yu Qian turned around and saw Dumpling pointing at the gradually fading totem between her eyebrows and asked, "That's right." The Yu Qian replied affirmatively, but his eyes were still full of suspicion. "If the contract between the two of you has really been cancelled, why is there still this aura left? This is clearly a special power that the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix has after contracting with a human. Although ordinary Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenixes inherited a certain amount of bloodline power, they wouldn't have such an aura. But Dumpling had it at this moment." Hearing this answer, Chu Luiwei and Dumpling quickly looked at each other and exchanged glances. His explanation was very interesting. Since this aura was only produced when the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix contracted with a human, how did he know? Seeing how confident he was, he must have seen it before. Then, there was only one explanation. The ancestor of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix, Yi Ling, had a contract with the God Master of the Palace of the Illusory God. So now, he began to suspect Dumpling. Understanding this point, Chu Luiwei looked at Dumpling and blinked gently. Dumpling's heart lit up, and she immediately took out a crimson gold feather. "I think it should be because of the ancestor's golden feather, right?" Seeing Dumpling take out the ancestor's golden feather, a trace of shock flashed across the Yu Qian's face. "Why do you have this?" "Of course it's because I'm the young master." Dumpling rolled her eyes and carefully put away the ancestor's golden feather. "If it's not with me, do you think it's with you?" She hated Yu Qian to the core, so she didn't hold back when she spoke. However, Yu Qian didn't have the time to care about this. He frowned doubtfully and looked at Dumpling. The aura he had sensed earlier was indeed the same as the aura on the ancestor's golden feather. Could it be that I was wrong? After all, Dumpling had the purest bloodline, so it was reasonable for her to obtain the ancestor's golden feather. Back then he had asked Yi Zhao for it, but he didn't manage to get it. It turned out that she was with Dumpling. Tuanzi's big eyes and the tip of her nose were still red. She sniffled and continued to complain. You've already separated me from Ayu. What other contract can I have? His words were still filled with anger and dissatisfaction. Yu Qian gradually dispelled the doubts in his heart, and his expression eased. That's for the best. You have the purest bloodline. That kind of contract will only hinder your breakthrough. As he said that, he raised his chin. Let's go back to Fengming Mountain. After that, you'll be staying here most of the time. Dumpling looked at Chu Luiyue eagerly. I want you to go with me. Yu Qian paused. He wanted to directly refuse, but seeing that Dumpling was still agitated, he finally nodded and snorted. All right. As long as she can go up, I won't stop her. With that, he tapped the tip of his foot and took the lead to rush towards Fengming Mountain. On the other hand, Tuanzi turned around, ran over, and hugged Chu Luiyue's leg with its shiny little feet. Ayu, come with me. Chu Luiyue bent down and picked her up. All right. In any case, she would come here many times in the future. She would first go and take a look at the situation on Fengming Mountain. Dumpling hugged her and snuggled into her embrace, her face full of reluctance. Chu Luiyue patted her back and rushed towards Yu Qian. Very quickly, Chu Luiyue understood why Yu Qian said those words. On Fengming Mountain, there was an extremely powerful pressure. She had only gotten a little closer when she felt as if her chest was being pressed down by something. She felt stuffy and her speed also decreased. A transparent heat wave swept over from the mountain. It was scorching hot. Chu Luiyue's forehead was quickly covered in sweat. His back was also quickly drenched in sweat, and then quickly evaporated. Yu Qian turned around to look. Seeing her reaction, he sneered in his heart. The fire that year on Fengming Mountain had directly burned down the entire back mountain. Even though so many years had passed, every inch of land and every piece of rock still retained traces of what had happened back then. Back then, Yiling's 9 meridians had all been opened, and his strength was unparalleled. Even though he had been dead for many years, his power was still there. Even he didn't come here often. Not to mention a god like Chu Luiyue. About 15 minutes later, Yu Qian arrived at the peak of Fengming Mountain. He stood with his hands behind his back and waited for another 15 minutes before Chu Luiyue and Dumpling finally arrived. The moment her feet landed on the mountain, Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched, and she summoned her divine body almost immediately. A layer of beautiful soft armor quickly covered her body. With the divine body as a barrier, the burning sensation was finally reduced by a lot. Ayu, are you all right? Dumpling asked worriedly. Chu Luiyue shook her head. I'm fine. Because she was worried that she would reveal something in front of Yu Qian, she had stopped borrowing Dumpling's power from just now. That was why it took her a lot of effort to come here. However, as long as she could hide it from Yu Qian, it was all worth it. Dumpling jumped down from her arms. She was barefooted, and her small, white feet stepped on the scorched mountain rocks. Not only did she not look like she was in pain, but she even widened her eyes slightly as she tugged at the corner of Chu Luiyue's shirt and muttered, I'm sorry. Ayu, it's so comfortable here. Chu Luiyue felt relieved. It was fine as long as Dumpling was fine. Yu Qian chuckled at the side. The rocks on the back mountain were specially gathered by the Divine Master for Yi Ling back then. Not only can they nourish his body, but they can also increase his cultivation speed. Naturally, other places can't compare to them. If it were an ordinary crimson gold heavenly phoenix, they wouldn't be able to withstand it here. However, Dumpling has the purest bloodline, so she won't have this problem. This was why he had to choose this place to meet Chu Luiyue. Fengming Mountain was originally prepared for Dumpling. Hearing his words, Dumpling curled her lips. No matter how good the place is, it has already been burned down. What's there to cherish? She still liked to be with Ayu. Yi Zhao knew that she was extremely dependent on Chu Luiyue and couldn't change it in a short time, so he didn't pay much attention to it. In any case, Chu Luiyue wouldn't come often in the future. As time passed, The relationship between Dumpling and her would naturally fade. Dumpling, you can cultivate here in the future. Yu Qian's lips curled up. With your talent, it won't be long before you open your 7th meridian. In the future, it won't even be a problem for you to open your 9th meridian. Chapter 2277. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. The Yu Qian's words, it was as if he really hoped that Dumpling could open her meridians as soon as possible. This was the same as the owner of the eye from before. That person was obviously not the Yu Qian, but there must be some unknown relationship between the two. Otherwise, that eye wouldn't have been able to summon the illusory god palace back in the Red Moon Desert. Even if it was just an illusion, it was enough to explain the problem. They wanted Dumpling to open her meridians, and even hoped that she would open her 9th meridian. Back then, Yiling had opened all 9 meridians, but didn't he betray the illusory god palace? After that, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was directly labeled as a sinful clan. Even Yi Zhao was captured and tortured. But Yu Qian's current attitude towards Dumpling was truly suspicious. Dumpling ignored Yu Qian. Yu, can you accompany me to take a look around? Chu Luiyue rubbed her head. All right. With that, the two of them walked to the side. Feng Ming Mountain was steep and towering. Although the top of the mountain was bare, it still contained an extremely shocking amount of power. To Dumpling, it was indeed the best place to cultivate. Walking on the charred mountain rocks, Chu Liuyue's emotions churned as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. All of a sudden, Tuanzi pulled her hand and said, Yu, it's so quiet here. I don't like it. At first, she did feel that this place was very suitable for cultivation, but after staying here for a long time, she felt that this place was too deserted. In the future, when Yu wasn't around, wouldn't it be boring for her to be alone? Without waiting for Chu Luiyue to speak, Yu Qian took the initiative and said, if you want to be more lively, the illusory god palace also has a lot of divine beasts. I can get them to accompany you. Chu Liuyue frowned slightly. Second divine envoy, this Feng Ming Mountain? I'm afraid ordinary divine beasts won't be able to stay here, right? Yu Qian said softly, it doesn't matter as long as Dumpling likes it. Dumpling glared at him. I don't like it. Wouldn't it be terrible if those magical beasts all died after coming here? Chu Luiyue pinched Dumpling's little face. Dumpling is not angry. There is no sign of life here. It is indeed a bit desolate. How about this? I will leave the 2 Tian baby to you. Dumpling was stunned. Really? Chu Luiyue nodded and took out a 2 Tian baby. He bent down and placed it in Dumpling's chubby little hand. The heaven and earth energy here is abundant. It's just right for me to raise it. Dumpling blinked and nodded vigorously. Good. In the future, you should come often too. After getting Chu Liuyue's affirmative answer, Dumpling ran to the side, picked up a stone, and threw it at the ground. Bang! A hole suddenly appeared on the mountain rock. Yu Qian's eyebrows twitched. Feng Ming Mountain was extremely difficult to shake. Tens of thousands of years of wind and rain had not left many traces on it. Dumpling just casually threw a stone, and Dumpling buried the 2 Tian baby, revealing only the 2 tender leaves at the top, gently swaying in the wind. That's good. Dumpling clapped her hands in satisfaction. She heard that 2 Tian baby could grow up, so it was very suitable to raise it here. Yu Qian glanced at the 2 Tian baby, but didn't care too much about it. It was just a small toy for Dumpling to relieve her boredom. Chu Luiyue wiped the sweat on her forehead that was still dripping down. Dumpling, I will go back first today. I will come to see you tomorrow. Hearing that, Tuanzi ran over and hugged her reluctantly. Then you must come tomorrow. Chu Luiyue smiled lightly. Yes. Then she took a deep breath and said goodbye to Yu Qian. Yu Qian was naturally happy about her departure. He didn't try to persuade her to stay and directly agreed. However, perhaps it was because Chu Luiyue was still cooperative with Dumpling's matter, or because Dumpling was still here, Yu Qian's attitude was still considered polite. After giving a few more instructions to Dumpling, Chu Luiyue left. After her figure disappeared into the distance, Yu Qian looked at Dumpling. Dumpling turned her back and sat down in front of the 2 Tian baby. Her entire body was filled with disgust for him. Yu Qian didn't mind. As long as she could open her meridians as soon as possible, nothing else mattered. Yu Qian also left quickly. Dumpling was the only one left in the huge Feng Ming mountain. Her cheeks puffed up in anger as she wiped away the tears hanging from the corner of her eyes and snorted softly. Acting was really not easy. When he got back, he would ask Yu for double the kisses. After Chu Luiwei came out of the barrier, she went straight to her residence. When she returned to the courtyard, it was already very late. Just as she arrived at the door, it opened from the inside. Rong Xiu was standing behind the door. There was a faint smile on his elegant face. "You're back." In an instant, Chu Luiwei's tense mind finally relaxed, and a strong sense of fatigue quickly surged up. During this period of time, she had experienced too many things. Previously, the string in her mind had always been taut, but now that she saw Rong Xiu, she finally let go of her guard. She took a step forward and threw herself into Rong Xiu's arms. Leaning against his firm and warm chest, she could even hear the powerful beating of his heart. A familiar cold fragrance wrapped around her. She took a deep breath and hugged his lean waist tightly with both arms. She leaned her head against his chest and rubbed against it. Rong Xiu's heart instantly softened. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders and pulled her into his embrace. Rong Xiu, she muttered softly. In an instant, a cold light flashed across his eyes as he asked softly, "Who bullied my Yu?" Chapter 2278. Chu Luiwei shook her head. "It's fine, it's just that Dumpling was left at Feng Ming Mountain." Even though she had used all sorts of methods to deceive Yu Qian, she still worried about Dumpling when she thought about how she would be alone for a long time. Rong Xiu kissed her forehead. "Let's talk inside." On the other side, Jin Yunlai returned to the illusory god palace after sending Chu Luiwei to Feng Ming Mountain. When he passed by the Black Jade Square, his footsteps paused. Two people were standing not far from the square, whispering something. He knew the man on the left, Kong Qinglin. He was the only refining saint that had appeared in the illusory god palace in recent years. He had just broken through and entered the illusory god palace not long ago. It wasn't strange that he would appear here. But the woman next to him, she was wearing a long dress with an exquisite forehead band. Her black hair fell to her ankles. She had a slender figure and a gentle face. Jin Yunlai didn't have any impression of her. There was no such person in the illusory god palace. "So, if I want to become a refining saint, I have to fight for a ray of holy light from here?" she asked softly. She was gentle, making people feel like they were bathed in a spring breeze. Kong Qinglin nodded. "That's right. This piece of primal chaos holy jade has appeared here tens of thousands of years ago. It can be considered the most precious treasure of the illusory god palace. It contains thousands of holy lights and has boundless power. As long as you can successfully summon a ray of holy light, you can successfully refine a saint artifact." As he spoke, he looked at Su Li curiously. "Speaking of which, I haven't asked yet. You said that you just came up from the Divine Ruins world, but when you came, you were already a refining saint. What's going on? The holy light in it won't leave the illusory god palace." In other words, it was impossible for a refining saint to appear in the Divine Ruins world below. Hearing Kong Qinglin's words, Jin Yunlai immediately understood. It turned out that this was the refining saint that Chu Luiwei wanted to invite. He leaned to the side and listened attentively. In fact, he also wanted to know what was going on. Su Li smiled faintly and explained, "Actually, I didn't break through just now. About 10,000 years ago, I was refining a weapon when a strange phenomenon occurred in the sky. A shield flew down. I don't know how, but I managed to successfully forge a saint artifact." "Shield?" Kong Qinglin was stunned. Su Li raised her hand and pointed forward. "Its shape seems to be similar to the missing piece in the middle." Kong Qinglin immediately understood. "I see," Su Li sighed softly. "Unfortunately, the power contained in the shield was too shocking. After I finished refining the saint artifact, I also died, leaving behind only a remnant of my soul. It wasn't easy for me to revive. Only when I came here did I realize that the shield actually flew out from the illusory god palace. The corners of her lips curved slightly as she spoke softly. I don't know how this happened. Kong Qinglin's lips moved as if he wanted to say something. 10,000 years ago, it was probably because of that riot. But this matter was forbidden in the illusory god palace, so he naturally couldn't say it. Su Li glanced at him, her eyes flashing slightly as she smiled and said, "Right, I heard that there hasn't been a refining saint in the illusory god palace for many years. It's really amazing that you were able to succeed." Hearing this, Kong Qinglin stroked his beard and laughed. "Not at all. Compared to you, Su Li, I'm still a bit lacking." Although he said that, it was clear that Kong Qinglin acknowledged and was proud of this matter. Of course, he had the qualifications to do so. Su Li asked curiously, "Actually, I don't understand. Logically speaking, in a place like the illusory god palace where geniuses and experts gather, there should be many who can break through to the refining saint realm. Why is it that you're the only one in all these years?" Kong Qinglin subconsciously said, "Naturally, it's because of this primal chaos sacred jade." His voice suddenly stopped. Su Li had already guessed something. Because of that missing piece? Kong Qinglin looked at Su Li with some hesitation, then nodded and said in a low voice, "Everyone in the illusory god palace has a tacit understanding of this matter, and very few people have mentioned it in these years. It's only because you're new and have a connection with that piece of chaos black jade that I'm telling you. But it's better not to mention it in the future." Su Li was about to ask again when she suddenly heard footsteps behind her. The two turned around at the same time. Seeing who it was, Kong Qinglin was startled and quickly bowed. "Greetings, seventh divine emissary." Su Li was startled. So the person in front of her was the seventh divine emissary? This name was like a thunderclap reverberating in the ears. She originally thought that she would see him when she came to the heavenly gate, but for some reason, the seventh divine emissary didn't appear that day. Today was the first time she officially met this person. Su Li greets the seventh divine emissary. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, but Su Li's face was still calm and gentle as usual. Jin Yunlai looked at her coldly. "To be able to become a refining saint in the divine ruins world, you do have some ability. However, this is the illusory god palace. If you want to stay here in the future, you'd better be careful with your words and actions. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, understand?" Was this a warning to her not to continue inquiring about what happened in the past? Su Li's mind raced, but her face revealed a bit of nervousness and she slightly lowered her head. "Yes." Kong Qinglin's heart also hung in the air. Of course, he knew that those words couldn't be said carelessly, but seeing that Su Li was really curious, he couldn't hold back and said it. Who knew that the seventh divine emissary was here? He must have heard everything. However, just as Kong Qinglin was nervous and worried, thinking that he was going to be punished, Jin Yunlai didn't say anything more and turned to leave. Hearing the footsteps gradually fade away, Su Li gently sighed and muttered softly, "It seems that in this illusory god palace, I really have to be careful everywhere." Kong Qinglin's back was already soaked with sweat. A gentle breeze blew, and a chill went straight to the top of his head. Thank goodness, he wiped the sweat from his forehead with lingering fear. "Su Li, don't talk about these things in the future. The seventh divine emissary probably saw that it was your first mistake today, so he let you off. If you do it again in the future, it won't be so easy." Su Li looked at his reaction thoughtfully. Is the seventh divine emissary very strict? He had only said a few words, but Kong Qinglin was already so nervous. Kong Qinglin smiled bitterly. "Not at all the divine emissaries are like this. After all, it's related to the past. Forget it. Don't mention it in the future to avoid causing trouble for yourself." Su Li blinked her eyes and smiled gently. "Okay." On the other side, Jin Yunlai wanted to go back to his residence directly, but halfway there, he suddenly remembered what happened today. He turned around and walked in another direction. Chapter 2279. He walked forward and finally arrived at the door of a courtyard. The courtyard was quiet, and there was no sound at all. Looking in from the outside, one could see a thick pile of fallen leaves in the courtyard. It was as if no one had lived here for many years, and it was lonely and cold. Jin Yunlai raised his hand and knocked on the door. Knock knock. First Oracle, Yunlai requests an audience. He spoke loudly. However, after waiting for a while, there was no response from inside. Jin Yunlai frowned slightly and increased the strength of his hand. Knock knock. First Oracle, I have something important to report to you. Still, there was silence. Jin Yunlai waited for a while, and his eyes flashed with determination. Then, he took a step forward and was about to push the door open and enter. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful aura suddenly came from inside. Jin Yunlai was shocked and immediately retreated without thinking. However, he was fast, but the other party's attack was faster. Bang! He could not dodge in time and was hit in the chest by the force, and he fell heavily to the ground. Jin Yunlai's chest shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He clutched his chest and stared at the door in shock. First Oracle, Jin Yunlai, you're too presumptuous. A cold voice came out from inside. It was like a fierce wind and frost that instantly caused Jin Yunlai to freeze on the spot. He forcefully swallowed the strong taste of blood and endured the pain in his body. He quickly got up and bowed respectfully. Yunlai did not mean to offend you. Please forgive me, First Oracle. His heart almost stopped beating at this moment, and the blood in his body instantly froze. The First Oracle's position in the palace of the illusory god was extremely respected. Not to mention the others, even the remaining divine envoys had no choice but to wait obediently. Now, he had tried to barge in, which was a serious crime. After a while, the voice continued to come from inside. Do you know who you are suspecting? Jin Yunlai was shocked and immediately knelt on one knee. Yunlai knows his mistake. Bang! His knee landed heavily on the ground, making people's scalps go numb. This time, it almost made people think that his knees were going to shatter because of this. The courtyard fell into silence once more. Jin Yunlai's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something, and she didn't dare to breathe. An extreme sense of unease welled up in his heart. He rarely felt this way. But now, he was facing the first divine envoy. The reason why he did what he did just now was because he was suspicious of the First Oracle. For so many years, the first divine emissary had never stepped out of the courtyard. Shu Jing and the others had repeatedly requested to see him, but he had never agreed. Until now, even the authority of Fengming Mountain had been completely handed over to the second divine envoy. Jin Yunlai did not understand. Why did the First Oracle give him all his authority? Why did he stay in this small courtyard and refuse to come out? He could not help doubting it. Therefore, the reason why he took the risk earlier was to test the waters. What was certain was that the first divine envoy was indeed inside. And his strength seemed to have improved compared to before. Just now, if he wanted to, Jin Yunlai's life and death would be in his hands. There won't be a next time. After a long time, the voice finally sounded again. Jin Yunlai let out a long sigh of relief. Thank you, First Divine Envoy. He bowed respectfully and slowly got up. Yunlai will take his leave. There was no response from inside. Jin Yunlai turned around and left. However, just as he took a step, he suddenly paused. After hesitating for a while, he finally turned around and looked at the tightly shut courtyard door. First Divine Envoy, are you really at ease to entrust Fengming Mountain to the second divine envoy? He invited Shangguanyu over today. After a pause, he said again, if everything goes smoothly, the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan will stay in Fengming Mountain from now on. He has his reasons for doing so. The voice was calm, as if he didn't care too much. Since he's in charge of Fengming Mountain now, he can naturally make the decision. If you have any objections, you can directly talk to him. There's no need to come here. But, Jin Yunlai wanted to say something but hesitated. But these should be the matters of the first divine envoy. He knew what these things meant, but he didn't seem to have any intention of making a move. Could it be that this was his intention all along? Jin Yunlai couldn't figure it out. No matter what, he couldn't go to the second divine envoy. After so long, he knew very well what kind of person the Yuqian was. He usually seemed gentle, but in reality, he was extremely strong. If anyone dared to oppose his decision, he would definitely be dissatisfied. Only the first divine envoy could restrain him a little, but now the first divine envoy didn't seem to have any intention of interfering. What had the first divine envoy been busy with all these years? If it was in the past, he would definitely not let the Yuqian do as he pleased. But it seemed that the first divine envoy wouldn't see him today. Jin Yunlai clenched his fists and stood there for a long time before finally bowing slightly. Yunlai understands. After saying that, he finally left. After he left, the courtyard once again fell into silence. A wind blew, sweeping up the broken leaves in the courtyard, revealing a murderous aura. Suddenly, something seemed to be moving under the pile of leaves. That voice came again. I know you want to go to Fengming Mountain, but now is not the time. The commotion under the pile of leaves finally died down. Jin Yunlai raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His expression had returned to normal. Although what he did just now was dangerous, he didn't regret it. At the very least, it dispelled the doubts in his heart. Although he still didn't know what the first divine envoy was planning, he could finally feel at ease. If he didn't want to see him, then so be it. Thinking of this, his hanging heart could be considered to have settled down. Suddenly, a figure hurriedly walked past him. Jin Yunlai was suddenly stunned. Xu Jing? Shouldn't she be at Herb Mountain at this time? What was she doing in such a hurry? Jin Yunlai looked in her direction and frowned slightly. Sixth divine envoy? She arrived in front of a courtyard and pushed open the door with ease. Then she went straight into the room. As soon as she entered, a faint smell of blood assaulted her nose. She frowned slightly and immediately turned around to close the door. The doors and windows of the room were tightly shut, and it was very dark. Coupled with the smell, it was even more uncomfortable. Although she had been here several times, she was still not used to it. Xu Jing calmed herself down and bowed in the direction of the screen. Sixth divine envoy, I'm here. A moment later, a hoarse voice sounded. Put everything down. Yes. Xu Jing responded, took out a jade box, and placed it on the table next to her. Chapter 2280. There was a hint of displeasure in that coarse and hoarse voice. Only one. Xu Jing said, after all, this is a medicine at the level of a medical sage. It's extremely difficult to refine. The man chuckled. But it's been many years since you became a medical sage. I can only say that your skills haven't improved much over the years. Xu Jing's expression stiffened for a moment, and a cold look flashed across her eyes. No one liked being said such things, let alone Xu Jing. It's extremely difficult to improve after becoming a medical sage. You can't say that. The person who was in charge of the Herb Mountain was much more efficient than you after becoming a medical sage. Xu Jing's expression turned completely cold. Sixth divine emissary, if you're not satisfied with me, you can find someone else to help you. She wanted to know who else in the illusory god palace could help her. That voice laughed softly. Why are you in such a hurry? Anyway, the Herb Mountain is already yours, and no one will fight with you for it. Then, a black rope flew out from behind the screen and took the jade box away. Xu Jing stood with her hands by her side and said coldly, how do you know? What's more, my authority over the Herb Mountain has been revoked. How can this Herb Mountain be considered mine? I heard about this, and it's indeed a bit sudden. But you can't completely blame others for this. Who told you not to restrain yourself before? If you weren't so anxious, you probably wouldn't have fallen to this state. Xu Jing didn't want to talk about this. Her mood was already bad enough, and she couldn't bear to hear other people's criticism. Sixth divine emissary, if you have the time and energy, you should think more about yourself. Xu Jing said coldly. Even with the help of my pill, it's still very difficult for you to reconstruct your divine body. The voice behind the screen was silent for a while. Of course I know that. Xu Jing's eyes flashed slightly, and she asked tentatively, "Actually, I haven't asked you before, but your injuries, what's going on?" To be able to injure the sixth divine emissary to such an extent, it was obvious that the opponent wasn't an ordinary person. However, the sixth divine emissary did not seem to have any intention of telling her this. "It's all in the past anyway. There's no point in telling you." Xu Jing was really curious, but she couldn't get anything out of the sixth oracle, so she could only change the topic. "By the way, do you know what happened to the first oracle recently? The gate of heaven had been open for 2 months, but he had not stepped out of the gate even once. I went to ask for an audience, but I never received permission. The matters of the first divine envoy are not something you and I can interfere with. If you have the time, you should go back and think about how to improve your strength." Before Xu Jing could finish, the voice inside the room interrupted him in a hurry. He spoke very quickly and his tone was tense. It was very different from usual, as if it was filled with deep fear. Xu Jing frowned. Although the divine envoys were extremely respectful to the first divine envoy, it didn't seem to be to such an extent, right? Why did the sixth divine emissary change so much when he returned this time? She pursed her lips and took a step forward. "Mo Shiqian, do you know something?" "That's how it is." In the room, Chu Luiwei briefly explained the matter to Rong Xiu. "That second divine envoy is very domineering. If I don't agree, I'm afraid I won't be able to leave Fengming Mountain today." Rong Xiu nodded. Chu Luiwei continued, "Speaking of which, I've never heard of the first divine envoy. This matter involves the divine beast guarding the palace. I thought that the first divine envoy should be in charge." Sin Yi, who was walking to the door, stopped in his tracks. Digression, 6 o'clock. Chapter 2281. However, this pause was only for a moment, and he quickly returned to normal and entered the room. "Master, Your Highness." Seeing Sin Yi enter, Chu Luiwei nodded slightly. "Perhaps the first divine emissary is busy with other things." Rong Xiu said indifferently. "The second divine emissary's status is only second to him, so it's not strange for him to be personally in charge of this matter." "I'm just curious." Chu Luiwei tapped her fingers on the armrest of the chair. "They seem to want Dumpling to open her meridians as soon as possible. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, the owner of that eye clearly had the same thoughts. He even tried his best to capture Dumpling and forcefully open her meridians. This time, although the second divine emissary, Yu Qian, did not use such cruel methods, from a certain perspective, he still coerced her and Dumpling. Fortunately, the contract between her and Dumpling had already been changed. Otherwise, she really didn't know how to get through this. Chu Luiwei also had her own plans. There was another important reason why she was willing to go with the flow. If Dumpling could open her seventh meridian, there was hope of saving Yizhao. Although Fengming Mountain had been burned down, it was still a holy land for cultivation for the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Especially Dumpling. She had the same pure bloodline as her ancestor and had the ancestor's golden feather in her hands. Obviously, staying at Fengming Mountain would greatly increase her cultivation speed. "Lu Yu." At this moment, Mu Hongyu rushed in from outside. "Lu Yu, you're back." Chu Luiwei collected her thoughts and looked up. Seeing Mu Hongyu's excited expression, she couldn't help but ask, "Hongyu, what's wrong?" Mu Hongyu ran over and saw Rong Xiu and Sin Yi in the room. She coughed. "I have something to tell you." Chu Luiwei nodded. "Just say it." Rong Xiu and Sin Yi were the people she trusted the most. Mu Hongyu hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She walked closer and said softly, "Lu Yu, there seems to be something wrong with the sea outside the illusory god palace." Chu Liuyue's heart stirred as he glanced at Sin Yi. Sin Yi nodded and walked over to close the door. He then raised his hand to set up a barrier, isolating all sounds. Chu Luiwei asked again, "What did you find?" Mu Hongyu's hands were twisted into a ball. She was a little conflicted. "The master might be under that sea." Chu Liuyue's eyes flickered. "How can you tell? Did you notice something?" Mu Hongyu sighed and explained. Actually, when I came that day, I felt that the sea was a little strange, but I didn't take it to heart at that time. I've been thinking about it for the past few days and finally noticed something strange. Lu Yu, the spatial power under that sea is very complicated. It seems to be Master's work. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The reason why she guessed that Diwu Zhangze was imprisoned under that sea was because she heard a faint painful groan when she left last time. That voice was definitely Diwu Zhangze's. She couldn't have heard wrongly. When Mu Hongyu came to say that there was something wrong with that sea, she thought that she had encountered the same situation as her. She didn't expect. You can sense the changes in the spatial power below? Mu Hongyu nodded and gestured with her hands. That's right. Under normal circumstances, the spatial power above and below the sea should be about the same. But when we passed over the sea that day, I discovered that there seemed to be several forces intertwining with each other. It was extremely chaotic. Later on, when I thought about it, it was indeed a mark that Master deliberately left behind. Other than him, I don't know anyone else who can do such a thing. She furrowed her brows nervously. But this is only my guess. I have to go down and see for myself whether it's true or not. I just feel a little uneasy, so I came over to tell you. There's no need to guess. It should be true. Chu Luiyue softly interrupted her. Then, she briefly recounted what happened earlier. I was only suspecting it at first. But if even you say so, then this matter is most likely true. The room fell into a short dead silence. Mu Hongyu finally came back to her senses. But who exactly did Master offend to be imprisoned under that sea? Anyone who had been to that sea knew what kind of shocking and ferocious power was hidden in the surging waves. Once a high god powerhouse fell into it, there would be nothing left of him in a few breaths' time. He wouldn't even have the time to struggle and ask for help. Even if Diwu Zhangze was stronger, he would definitely be tortured inhumanly if he was imprisoned in that place. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. She had the same question in her mind. Not only Diwu Zhangze, but also Dugu Mabao and Lan Xiao. The three of them were first trapped in the Red Moon Desert and didn't see the light of day for tens of thousands of years. Then, they were brought here and imprisoned separately. It wasn't that she didn't have any guesses. Dugu Mabao and the other two must have some kind of relationship with the Illusory God Palace or the Illusory God Palace. Because of some reason, they were punished like this. But now that she didn't have any more clues or evidence, she naturally couldn't make any guesses. Mu Hongyu suddenly grabbed her hand and whispered, "Don't worry. Lu Yu, I want to go down to that sea to take a look." Chu Luiyue frowned. But Mu Hongyu nodded. But you're still a high god. If you go down rashly, I'm afraid Master left a space under the sea. I can go there. Mu Hongyu said. Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. Really? Mu Hongyu nodded. So, the only problem now is that it's a bit difficult to get out of the Heavenly Gate. The Heavenly Gate of the Illusory God Palace was heavily guarded. It was almost impossible to leave quietly. Chu Luiyue thought for a while and said, "It's not difficult to get out. The difficult part is how to not be discovered. Since Diwu Zhangze was imprisoned there must be someone secretly watching over him." Rong Xiu suddenly said, "If your incorporeal body breaks through again, you'll be able to fool everyone." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.